The diplomatic incident. Ambassador Sarah Chen had attended enough Galactic Confederation sessions to know when something was wrong. The massive crystalline chamber of the Grand Assembly held representatives from over 300 species, but today the usual diplomatic murmurs had been replaced by an unmistakable undercurrent of anticipation. Thousands of eyes, ranging from compound to bioluminescent, kept darting in her direction. She maintained her composure, smoothing down her formal diplomatic uniform as she sat in Earth's designated seat. After 15 years representing humanity in galactic politics, she learned that showing weakness was never an option. The Confederation's more established species already view humans as barely evolved primitives. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her squirm. "The Grand Assembly will now commence," announced High Speaker Tilara, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into dancing patterns. "We gather today to address an unprecedented situation regarding the Visharan Dominion." Sarah's attention sharpened. The Visharans were one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations, known for their rigid social hierarchy and emotional suppression. They considered feelings to be primitive evolutionary holdovers, priding themselves on pure logic and rationality. Their representative, a tall, silver-skinned humanoid, sat motionless several tiers above her. Prince Kareth of the Visharan Dominion has been deemed unsuitable for succession. Tilara continued. Medical examinations have revealed a genetic anomaly resulting in excessive emotional capacity and empathic abilities. Whispers erupted throughout the chamber. Sarah caught fragments of conversations in dozens of languages, most expressing shock or derision. The Visharan representative remained eerily still. In accordance with Visharan law, Prince Kareth must be removed from the line of succession and placed under external guardianship until reaching the age of majority in 50 standard years. Tilara's crystalline features shifted in what Sarah recognized as discomfort. The High Council has reviewed potential guardians and reached a decision. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as Tilara's gaze fixed directly on her. Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth has been selected as Prince Kareth's guardian, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of reactions. Some species buzzed with excitement, others chittered in amusement, and a few made sounds Sarah's universal translator couldn't process. The Visharan representative finally moved, rising to their feet in a sharp, angular motion. "This is unacceptable," they declared, voice perfectly modulated despite the obvious protest. Placing a Visharan prince in the care of humans. They are an emotional species themselves, barely a century into space travel. This will only exacerbate the prince's condition. Sarah stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I would remind the honorable representative that Earth has successfully integrated into the Confederation despite our emotional nature. Perhaps that makes us uniquely qualified to help Prince Kareth navigate his situation." Help. The Visharan's silver skin rippled in what Sarah recognized as disgust. The prince requires correction, not encouragement of his defect. Emotional intelligence is not a defect, Sarah countered, feeling the weight of thousands of alien gazes. On Earth, empathy is considered a strength, particularly in leaders and diplomats. We've proven that emotional awareness and logical thinking can coexist, which is precisely why you were chosen. Tilara interrupted, her crystalline form pulsing with authority. The Council believes that humanity's experience in balancing emotion and reason makes Earth the ideal environment for Prince Kareth's development. Sarah noticed movement at one of the chamber's entrances. 2 Visharan guards escorted a younger member of their species forward. Prince Kareth appeared to be in his early teens by human standards, though Sarah knew Visharans aged differently. Unlike the rigid posture of other Visharans, he moved with a fluid grace. His silver skin rippled with iridescent patterns that betrayed his emotional state. Fear, uncertainty, but also curiosity as his gaze met hers. "Ambassador Chen," Tilara said, "do you accept guardianship of Prince Kareth, with all associated responsibilities and diplomatic implications?" Sarah looked at the young prince again. Behind his careful composure, She saw something familiar. The same isolation she'd felt as the first human ambassador, trying to navigate a galaxy that saw her species as primitive and emotional. In that moment, her decision was made. "I accept," she declared firmly. Earth welcomes Prince Kareth and commits to providing him an environment where he can develop all aspects of his nature, both logical and emotional. The chamber once again filled with mixed reactions, but Sarah kept her attention on Kareth. The prince's skin rippled with a pattern she hadn't seen before. Hope. "Then it is done," Tilara announced. "Prince Kareth will depart for Earth within one standard day. This assembly is adjourned." As the chamber began to empty, Sarah made her way to where Kareth stood. Up close, she could see the subtle variations in his silver skin, the slight tremors that betrayed his anxiety despite Visharan training. "Hello, Prince Kareth," she said softly. "I'm Sarah Chen. I know this isn't what you expected, but I promise you'll have the freedom to be yourself on Earth." The prince's skin rippled with complex patterns before he spoke, his voice carrying unusual warmth for Visharan. "Thank you, Ambassador. I feel that this may be an interesting opportunity." Sarah smiled, already noting how his emotional expressions differed from Visharan norms. She also noted the dark looks from other Visharan officials as they swept past. This wouldn't be easy. She was now responsible for a politically explosive ward, and she'd likely made powerful enemies today. But as she led Kareth out of the chamber, Sarah felt certain she'd made the right choice. Sometimes the greatest diplomatic incidents led to the most important breakthroughs. And perhaps, she thought, this young prince could help bridge the gap between emotion and logic that divided so many species. She just had to keep him safe long enough to find out. Cultural clash. The Earth Diplomatic Complex in New Singapore rose like a gleaming beacon against the evening sky, its architecture a blend of human creativity and alien influences. Sarah Chen stood at the window of her private quarters, watching the first rays of sunrise paint the sky in brilliant hues. Behind her, Prince Kareth was experiencing his first Earth breakfast. "These pancakes contain no logical nutritional balance," he observed, even as his silver skin rippled with pleasure at another bite. "Yet I find myself wanting more." Sarah smiled, remembering her own struggles with Visharan cuisine. "Food isn't just about nutrition, Kareth. Sometimes it's about joy, comfort, or sharing experiences with others. Joy and sustenance is." He paused, searching for words that wouldn't betray his species' teachings. "Inefficient." "Is it?" Sarah turned from the window. "Those pancakes just taught you something about human culture, made you experience new sensations, and gave us a topic for meaningful discussion. Seems efficient to me." Kareth's skin rippled with patterns that Sarah was learning to recognize as amusement, though he quickly suppressed them. 3 days on Earth had already begun to crack his rigid Visharan conditioning, but she knew the real challenges were just beginning. Her comm unit chimed with priority alerts. She'd been expecting this. "Ambassador Chen," her AI assistant announced, "the Visharan embassy has filed formal protests regarding Prince Kareth's living arrangements. They demand he be housed in their compound and follow traditional Visharan protocols." "Denied," Sarah replied firmly. "The guardianship agreement grants me full authority over the prince's care. Send them the relevant documentation." Additionally, the AI continued, 3 news organizations are requesting interviews about the alien prince scandal, and security has detected unauthorized surveillance devices near your quarters. Kareth's skin dulled to a worried gray. "Perhaps I should accept the Visharan embassy's offer. I do not wish to cause diplomatic difficulties." "You're not causing anything," Sarah assured him. "This is just the opening move in a game they've been planning since before we left the Confederation. But we're going to change the rules." A subtle vibration ran through the building, and Sarah's security alerts flashed red. Moments later, her door chime sounded. "Enter," she called, already knowing who it would be. Captain Maya Rodriguez strode in, her powered armor humming quietly. As head of diplomatic security, she'd been fully briefed on Kareth's situation. "Ambassador, We've detected multiple unauthorized ships entering Earth's atmosphere. They're using diplomatic credentials, but their flight patterns suggest military training. Assassins, Krith stated quietly. The purest faction of my species considers my existence a threat to Visharan genetic purity. They will not stop until I am eliminated. Sarah noticed his skin was completely still, a sign of extreme Visharan distress. She moved closer, careful not to touch him without permission. This is why you're staying here, Kareth. We anticipated this. Captain Rodriguez. Maya nodded sharply. Security protocols are already activated. We've also contacted our allies among the Confederation species. Any attack on Earth's diplomatic compound would violate multiple treaties. The Visharans know this. Sarah added. They're testing our resolve, seeing how far they can push before we push back. She turned to Kareth. But that's not our only concern, is it? Tell me what you're sensing. The young prince's skin rippled with surprise. You noticed. Your empathic abilities have been growing stronger since we left Visharan space. You've been reacting to emotions you shouldn't be able to detect yet. Greth's composed facade cracked slightly. I feel everything. The humans in this building, their hopes and fears. The Visharan agents above us, their cold determination. It's overwhelming. Which is exactly why you need training, not suppression. Sarah pulled up a holographic display. I've arranged for you to meet with Earth's leading experts in psychic ability management. Many human telepaths and empaths have learned to control their gifts without losing them. The Visharan embassy will object, Maya pointed out. Let them. Sarah's voice hardened. They lost the right to dictate Kareth's development when they cast him out. Captain, please escort the prince to his first session. I have some diplomatic fires to start. Once they were gone, Sarah activated her comm unit. Connect me to the Confederation Council. It's time they understood exactly what humanity thinks about genetic discrimination. The next few hours were a whirlwind of diplomatic maneuvering. Sarah leveraged every alliance and favor she'd built over 15 years, making it clear that Earth considered any threat to Kareth an act of hostility. She watched satisfaction ripple through the holographic faces of her allies as she systematically dismantled the Visharan protests. Your species claims to follow pure logic, she told the Visharan ambassador. So let me be logical. Earth has custody of Prince Kareth. We will protect him. We will help him develop all of his abilities. Any attempt to harm or remove him will be met with the full diplomatic and military response of Earth and our allies. Is that clear enough for your logical minds to process? The ambassador's silver skin remained perfectly still. You cannot protect him forever, Ambassador Chen. Some outcomes are inevitable. Nothing is inevitable, Sarah countered. That's another thing you'll learn from humans. When she finally ended the calls, Sarah found Kareth waiting in her office. His skin shimmered with new patterns she hadn't seen before. The training helped, he said before she could ask. The human instructors, they understand. They show me how to channel the emotions, not suppress them. He paused. I felt your defense of me in the diplomatic calls. No one has ever fought for me before. Get used to it, Sarah smiled. Humans are pretty stubborn about protecting our own. Am I one of your own? You are now. And the sooner the galaxy understands that humanity's emotional weakness is actually our greatest strength, the better off everyone will be. Kareth's skin rippled with a pattern that was becoming more frequent, hope mixed with determination. I believe, he said carefully, that I am going to learn many interesting things on Earth. Sarah looked out at the setting sun, thinking of the challenges ahead. The Visharans wouldn't give up easily, and Kareth's growing abilities would only make him a bigger target. But as she watched the young prince experiment with letting his skin patterns flow naturally, she knew they'd made the right choice. Sometimes the greatest diplomatic victories came not from showing strength, but from having the courage to embrace what others called weakness, hidden strengths. 3 months into Kareth's stay on Earth, Sarah Chen found herself facing an unexpected crisis. The Confederation's emergency alert had come during Karith's weekly progress evaluation, interrupting his demonstration of newly controlled empathic abilities. The Arxur and Meridian delegations are requesting immediate Earth mediation, her AI assistant reported. Their fleets are in attack position near the Centauri neutral zone. Sarah's blood ran cold. The Arxur were silicon-based predators with a warrior culture, while the Meridians were energy beings who viewed physical combat as primitive. Their philosophical differences had led to centuries of tension, but never open warfare, until now. They specifically requested Earth, she asked, already knowing this wasn't a coincidence. Both sides cited humanity's unique perspective as their reason. The AI paused. The Visharan delegation has formally objected to Earth's involvement, claiming our emotional nature makes us unsuitable mediators. Kareth, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. They're wrong. His silver skin rippled with purpose. In fact, I believe I know why both species asked for Earth. Sarah studied her ward carefully. In the months since arriving, Kareth had grown more confident in expressing his insights. His empathic abilities had developed far beyond Visharan predictions, and his unique perspective often proved valuable. Tell me, she encouraged. The Arxur and Meridians appear opposed, but their emotional patterns are similar. Frustration, fear, pride. They're like two people speaking different languages, each thinking the other is being deliberately obtuse. His skin shimmered with excited realization. They need translators who understand both logic and emotion. They need us. Sarah considered this. Standard diplomatic protocols would involve formal presentations from both sides, careful negotiation of terms, and probably war before any resolution was reached. But perhaps it was time for a different approach. How would you handle this? She asked Kareth. His skin rippled with surprise, then settled into thoughtful patterns. I would listen, not just to their words, but to their emotional truth. On Earth, I've learned that what people say often matters less than what they feel. Sarah smiled. Exactly. Captain Rodriguez, prepare a shuttle. We're going to the Centauri neutral zone. The captain's hologram flickered with concern. Ambassador, taking the prince into a potential combat zone is exactly what we need to do. Sarah finished. Sometimes the biggest risks yield the greatest rewards. Hours later, their diplomatic shuttle arrived at a massive space station serving as neutral ground. The Arxur flagship loomed to one side, all sharp angles and weapon ports, while the Meridian vessel pulsed with ethereal energy on the other. Sarah had insisted on an unusual seating arrangement in the conference room. Instead of the traditional opposing sides, she placed the delegates in a circle, with herself and Kareth, at what she called emotional equidistant points. The Arxur war speaker, a towering crystalline figure named Kraz, growled through his translator. The Meridians mock our sacred combat traditions. They refuse ritual challenges, claiming they're above physical conflict. Physical violence is inherently inferior to energy state discourse. The Meridian representative, a swirling pattern of light called First Pulse, countered. The Arxur's insistence on primitive combat rituals threatens the very fabric of civilized space. Kareth's skin rippled with insight. Ambassador, he whispered to Sarah, their emotional patterns, they're almost identical. Both feel disrespected, both fear loss of identity. The conflict isn't about combat at all. Sarah nodded slightly. This was why she'd brought him. War Speaker Kraz, when you issue a ritual challenge, what does it represent to your people? The crystalline warrior shifted. Honor. Respect. We acknowledge our opponents as equals worthy of combat. And First Pulse, Sarah turned to the Meridian. When you engage in energy state discourse, what does it represent? The light pattern swirled thoughtfully. Understanding. Respect. We acknowledge others as beings worthy of deep communion. You're both seeking the same thing, Greth said suddenly, his silver skin pulsing with empathic resonance. Different methods, but the same goal. meaningful connection, and mutual respect. The delegates fell silent, considering. Sarah pressed the advantage. Earth has learned that there are many ways to show respect. Sometimes the strongest warriors are those who know when not to fight. And sometimes the most elevated discourse happens through physical expression. The young one, Kraz, turned his crystalline sensors toward Kareth. Your species is known for emotional suppression, yet you radiate understanding. How? Kareth's skin rippled with subtle patterns. On Earth, I learned that what some call weakness can be strength. The Arxer show respect through the willingness to fight. The Meridians show it through the willingness to merge consciousness. Perhaps you could create a new tradition that honors both. First Pulse's light patterns shifted, a ritual that combines physical presence with energy communion. Unprecedented, but intriguing. A combat of minds and bodies, Kraz mused, crystal facets gleaming. Worthy opponents meeting in multiple dimensions of battle. Sarah watched in amazement as the two ancient species began exploring ways to blend their traditions. Kareth's empathic abilities had helped them see past surface differences to their shared values, something countless logical diplomats had failed to achieve. Hours later, back on their shuttle, Kareth's skin rippled with exhaustion but satisfaction. They simply needed someone to feel what they felt, he said quietly, to translate emotion into understanding. The very thing the Visharans tried to suppress in you, Sarah noted. Your empathy just helped prevent a war that could have devastated the galaxy. Still think it's a weakness? No. Kareth's skin shimmered with new confidence. But I suspect the Visharans will see this as proof of my dangerous influence. They'll say I'm spreading emotional instability. Let them. Sarah smiled. Because the rest of the galaxy just saw something different. They saw how combining emotion with logic can solve problems that neither could handle alone. You're not just adapting to human ways, Kareth. You're helping create something new. As their shuttle headed home, Sarah received word that both the Arxer and Meridian delegations had formally commended Earth's diplomatic approach. More surprisingly, 3 other species had requested human mediators for their own conflicts. The galaxy was beginning to see that humanity's emotional nature wasn't a weakness after all, and a young Visharan prince, once cast out for being different, was helping lead the way to a new understanding between all species. Sarah glanced at Kareth, whose skin now rippled freely with the complex emotions he no longer tried to hide. Sometimes the greatest strength came from embracing exactly what others feared most about you. The conspiracy. Security breach in the diplomatic archives. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through Sarah's sleep. Someone's accessing classified files about Prince Kareth. Sarah was instantly awake, years of diplomatic crisis having honed her responses. Location: Sub-Level 3. But Ambassador. The access codes are Visharan diplomatic clearance. High level. Sarah encrypted her comm channel. Where's Kareth? Safe in his quarters. I have a team with him. Keep him there. I'm heading to the archives. The Earth diplomatic complex's lower levels were deliberately designed to confuse intruders, but Sarah knew every corridor. She moved silently, remembering her security training. The archive room's door was sealed, but someone had bypassed its security with sophisticated technology. Inside, a figure in Visharan diplomatic robes stood at a central console. Their silver skin was perfectly still, too still, even for a Visharan. Ambassador Trillin, Sarah said coldly. Bit late for research, isn't it? The Visharan ambassador turned slowly. Ambassador Chen, your security response time is impressive. Drop the act. Sarah moved closer, noting the subtle differences in the ambassador's appearance. You're not Trillin. The real ambassador never stands that straight, old combat injury. Who are you? The imposter's silver skin rippled once, then settled. Perceptive. Perhaps humans aren't as primitive as we thought. Their voice changed, becoming deeper. I am Executor Civil of the Genetic Purity Council. You've caused us quite a problem. Ambassador. by protecting a child from genetic discrimination, by interfering with necessary progress. Cheval's skin darkened. The Visharan achievement of emotional control took centuries of careful genetic selection. Now you harbor a throwback who threatens everything we've built. Sarah kept them talking while silently activating her emergency beacon. Kareth's abilities have already helped prevent an interstellar war. His empathy is a gift, not a threat. A single diplomatic success doesn't justify the risk. Surely you've noticed how his abilities are affecting others. How many species have started questioning our traditional approach to emotional control? I've noticed you're not actually accessing Kareth's files. Sarah nodded toward the console. You're downloading data about Earth's genetic diversity programs. Why? Cheval's skin rippled with what might have been appreciation. Humans have achieved remarkable advances despite, or because of, their genetic variety. Some believe this makes you dangerous. The Confederation was meant to promote unity, standardization, species working together by becoming more alike, not celebrating their differences. That's not unity. Sarah felt her anger rising. That's conformity. And Kareth isn't just a random mutation, is he? He's proof that your species' emotional suppression isn't as complete as you claimed. Clever. Cheval's skin darkened further. The prince represents a genetic line we thought eliminated generations ago. Natural empaths, capable of sensing and influencing emotions across species. His existence suggests our genetic programs have been less successful than reported. Sarah remembered conversations with Kareth, his descriptions of feeling isolated until he discovered others like him in Visharan society, others who had learned to hide their abilities. How many? She asked. How many Visharans have you branded as defective to maintain your illusion of control? Fewer each generation. Cheval's voice held a note of pride. But Earth's influence threatens that progress. Your championing of emotional expression, your acceptance of genetic diversity, your awakening traits we've spent centuries suppressing. Not just in Visharans, but in other species as well. Good. Sarah stood her ground. Because suppression isn't progress. It's fear. You're not protecting your species, you're stunting it. And now you're here to what? Sabotage Earth's genetic research. Eliminate evidence that might support Kareth's legitimacy. We're here to correct a mistake. Cheval moved with startling speed, revealing the hidden weapon. Your death will be attributed to radical elements opposed to human expansion. The prince will be returned to proper Visharan custody for rehabilitation. Actually, a new voice said, I believe we have something to say about that. Grith stepped through the doorway, his silver skin rippling with controlled power. Captain Rodriguez flanked him, her powered armor humming. But they weren't alone. Behind them stood representatives from 3 other Confederation species, the Arxer War Speaker Kraz, the Meridian First Pulse, and a crystalline member of the High Council. We suspected a conspiracy. Sarah smiled grimly. So we set a trap. Every word of this conversation has been recorded and transmitted to secure locations throughout the Confederation. Cheval's perfect composure finally cracked. You have no authority. We have every authority. The Council members' crystal form pulsed with anger. The Confederation Charter explicitly forbids genetic discrimination and forced modification of member species. You've admitted to centuries of violations. The Visharan people deserve to know the truth. Kareth's voice was steady, his skin rippling with purpose. How many of us were branded defective? How many were eliminated to maintain your perfect society? You cannot understand. Cheval's weapon wavered. The emotional chaos before genetic control, the wars, the suffering. I understand perfectly. Kareth stepped forward, his empathic abilities radiating calm. I feel your fear right now. Fear of change, of losing control. The same fear that drove our ancestors to suppress their emotions. But that fear has become a cage, trapping us in a false perfection that stunts our growth. Sarah watched in amazement as Kareth's empathic projection touched everyone in the room. Even Cheval's rigid control began to crack, their silver skin rippling with long-suppressed emotions. "The age of suppression is over," the council member declared. "The Confederation will launch a full investigation into the Genetic Purity Council's activities. All member species have the right to develop naturally, whether that development includes emotions or not." As security teams secured Civil and began downloading evidence from the archives, Sarah turned to Kareth. "You knew they'd try something like this." "I felt their desperation growing," he admitted. "Their fear every time another species questioned traditional emotional constraints. But I also felt something else. Hope, from those like me who had been hiding their true nature. Change is coming, Ambassador. Not just for Visherans, but for all species who were forced to suppress their differences." Sarah looked at their unlikely allies, the warrior Arxer, the energy being Meridian, the crystalline council member. Each represented a different path of evolution, yet they had come together to protect the right to be different. The real conspiracy, she realized, wasn't just against emotional species. It was against the very idea of diversity itself. And they never stood a chance. Kareth's skin rippled with quiet joy, because they didn't understand that our differences are what make us strong. As they left the archives, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The revelation of the Genetic Purity Council's activities would shock the Confederation. But it would also open the door for something new. A true union of species, each free to develop in their own way while learning from each other's differences. The very thing humanity had been advocating since they joined the galactic community. Revolution of the Heart. The Confederation Council chamber had never been so crowded. 3 weeks after the exposure of the Genetic Purity Council's conspiracy, representatives from every member species had gathered for an emergency session. Sarah Chen sat in Earth's designated position, watching the unusual spectacle unfold. Instead of the typical rigid diplomatic formations, species were mixing freely. A group of Visherans stood near her section, their silver skin rippling with previously forbidden emotional patterns. Next to them, crystalline beings from 3 different systems shared frequencies of light that expressed their feelings. Even the traditionally isolated Meridians were extending their energy fields to communicate emotionally with their neighbors. Kareth stood at the center of the chamber, his presence both a symbol and a catalyst. In the weeks since the conspiracy's exposure, hundreds of Visherans had come forward, revealing their hidden empathic abilities. Each story was similar: years of hiding, fear of being labeled defective, forced suppression of their true nature. The Genetic Purity Council's actions were not limited to Visherans. Kareth's voice carried clearly through the chamber. Their influence extended to many species, always pushing toward emotional suppression and genetic uniformity. But they failed to understand a fundamental truth that humans taught me. Diversity is not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be embraced. The chamber hummed with agreement. Sarah noticed how Kareth had grown into his role. No longer the uncertain young prince, but a leader in his own right. His skin rippled freely with complex emotional patterns that would have been forbidden months ago. "We stand at a crossroads," he continued. "The old path of suppression and uniformity has been exposed as a dead end. But the new path, that requires courage. The courage to feel, to change, to be different." A tall Visheran stepped forward. Second speaker Valen, one of their highest-ranking diplomats. His silver skin showed subtle ripples of emotion, carefully controlled but no longer completely suppressed. For centuries, Valen's voice carried the weight of authority. "We believed emotional control was the pinnacle of evolution. We saw humanity's emotional nature as primitive, something to be outgrown. We were wrong." Murmurs swept through the chamber. A Visheran second speaker admitting error was unprecedented. "Humans showed us a different way," Valen continued. "They proved that emotions and logic could coexist, that diversity could be a source of strength rather than weakness. Through Prince Kareth's exile to Earth, we have seen what our species could become if we stopped fearing our own nature." Sareth stood, knowing this was the moment they had prepared for. Earth proposes a new initiative, the Confederation Diversity Council. Not to enforce uniformity, but to protect and celebrate the unique traits of all species, to ensure that no child is ever again labeled defective for being different. The chamber erupted in discussion, but a new sound cut through the noise. From the Visharan section, a haunting melody began, the first song, an ancient art form banned generations ago for being too emotional. One by one, other Visharans joined in, their silver skin rippling in harmony with the notes. Greth's eyes met Sarah's, sharing a moment of triumph. This was what they had worked for, not just freedom for emotional Visharans, but a fundamental shift in how the Confederation viewed diversity. But their victory celebration was premature. "This is madness," a harsh voice cut through the music. Executor Ralkar, head of the Visharan Security Council, strode into the chamber. "You would undo centuries of careful genetic progress for some romantic notion of diversity." Behind him, a group of traditionally minded Visharans and representatives from other species who favored genetic purification formed a block of opposition. "Our society functions through control," Ralkar continued. "Order, predictability. What you propose is chaos. Is it chaos to be true to our nature?" Kareth challenged. "Is it disorder to feel joy, to express love, to connect deeply with others? Look around this chamber. See how many species are finally free to be themselves." "I see weakness." Ralkar's skin remained perfectly still. "I see primitive impulses that should have been eliminated generations ago. And I see the human influence that has corrupted our youth." Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Humanity didn't corrupt anyone. We simply showed that there was another way. Your own people chose to embrace it, not just Visharans, but members of every species who were forced to suppress their true nature. And now we will correct that error." Ralkar raised his hand, and security forces began sealing the chamber exits. The Genetic Purity Council may have been exposed, but its work was necessary. Order must be maintained. But as his forces moved in, something unexpected happened. The Visharans who had been singing didn't retreat. Instead, their song grew stronger, their emotional patterns rippling out in waves that touched everyone in the chamber. Greth joined them, his empathic abilities amplifying the effect. Sarah watched in amazement as the emotional resonance spread. Species that had never expressed feelings began to respond, adding their own unique voices to the harmony. "This is who we are," Greth declared, his voice carrying over the music. "Not just Visharans, but all of us. Beings capable of both thought and feeling, logic and emotion. We don't have to choose between order and chaos. We can find balance." The security forces hesitated, their own suppressed emotions stirring in response to the song. Even Ralkar's perfect composure cracked, his silver skin showing ripples of long-buried feelings. "The revolution you fear has already begun," Sarah addressed the chamber. "Not with weapons or violence, but with the simple courage to be authentic. Earth stands ready to help any species struggling with this transition, to share what we've learned about balancing emotion and reason." As the song reached its crescendo, Sarah saw the future taking shape, a confederation united not by enforced uniformity, but by celebrated diversity. The revolution wasn't just in what they had overthrown, but in what they were building in its place. A new way forward, where every species could be true to their nature while learning from each other's differences. And it had started with a single act of defiance, accepting an unwanted prince who proved that what others called weakness could become the greatest strength of all. A new understanding. 1 year after the exposure of the Genetic Purity Council's conspiracy, the Confederation gathered for a historic session. The Grand Assembly chamber had been transformed. Gone were the rigid hierarchical seating arrangements that had defined Confederation meetings for centuries. Instead, representatives clustered in organic groups, species mixing freely as they shared both thoughts and emotions. Sarah Chen stood with Kareth on the central platform, watching the future unfold. The young Visharan prince had grown into his role as a bridge between worlds. His silver skin rippled with complex emotional patterns that would have been forbidden a year ago, but now served as an example of what was possible. "The final votes are in," High Speaker Tilura announced, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that expressed joy. Another change from the old days of enforced neutrality. The Confederation Charter has been amended. The rights of genetic and emotional diversity are now protected for all member species. Cheers erupted in multiple languages and forms of expression. Sarah saw Visharans singing their ancient songs, their silver skin dancing with light. Crystalline beings pulsed with rainbow frequencies. Energy beings swirled in complex patterns of celebration. Even the traditionally stoic Arxer allowed their battle crystals to resonate with emotional harmonies. But not everyone celebrated. Executor Ralkar and his supporters sat in rigid isolation, their section of the chamber a pocket of stillness in the sea of emotion. "This is not over," Ralkar declared, standing. "You celebrate the undoing of centuries of progress. Our societies function through control, through the suppression of primitive impulses. What you call diversity, we name regression." "No," Krith's voice carried clearly. "What you call progress was actually fear. Fear of difference, fear of change, fear of our own nature. I know. I feel it in you even now." Ralkar's perfect composure cracked slightly. "You dare." "I dare to tell the truth." Krith moved forward, his empathic abilities touching everyone in the chamber. "You're not angry about chaos or regression. You're terrified of feeling, of being vulnerable, of discovering that everything you believed about superiority and control was wrong." Sarah watched as Krith did something unprecedented. He extended his empathic reach not to influence or control, but to share. Suddenly, everyone in the chamber could feel what he felt. The fear and isolation of his early years. The wonder of discovering his true nature on Earth. The joy of finally being accepted for who he was. "This is what you fought so hard to suppress," Krith said softly. "Not weakness, but connection. The ability to understand each other deeply, to share experiences across the boundaries of species and culture." The effect rippled through the chamber. Species that had never communicated emotionally began to resonate with each other. Ancient barriers of misunderstanding crumbled as they shared not just thoughts, but feelings. "What humanity taught me," Krith continued, "wasn't just that emotions could coexist with logic. They showed me that our differences make us stronger. That true unity comes not from enforced sameness, but from celebrating what makes each of us unique." Sarah stepped forward. "Earth doesn't want to replace the old order with chaos. We want to help build something new. A confederation where every species can develop according to their nature while learning from each other's strengths." "Impossible," Ralkar insisted, but his voice wavered. "Different species, different evolutionary paths. How can such diversity lead to anything but conflict?" "Like this," Krith said simply, and opened his emotional awareness fully. The chamber filled with a harmony of feeling and thought, each species contributing their unique perspective to a greater whole. The Arxer's warrior passion balanced the Meridian's ethereal contemplation. Visharan logic danced with human intuition. Crystalline precision merged with organic flexibility. Sarah felt it all through their connection, the fear giving way to wonder, the isolation transforming into belonging. Even Ralkar and his supporters couldn't maintain their emotional barriers in the face of such profound sharing. "This is what we feared." Ralkar's voice held disbelief as his silver skin finally rippled with genuine emotion. "This connection. This is what we can become," Krith answered. "Not despite our differences, but because of them. Every species brings something unique to this harmony. Together, we're more than we could ever be alone." The chamber resonated with agreement. Species that had once seen each other as primitive or alien now shared a deep understanding. The barriers between emotion and logic, between different evolutionary paths, dissolved in the face of shared experience. As the historic session concluded, Sarah watched Krith speaking with representatives from dozens of species. The unwanted prince had become a symbol of everything the Confederation could be, a union of diverse beings celebrating their differences while finding common ground. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, Greth said later, his skin rippling with gratitude, wasn't technology or knowledge. It was the simple truth that being different isn't a weakness. Sarah smiled. And your gift to humanity was proving that truth to the galaxy. The Visharans tried to create perfect beings through suppression and control. Instead, they created you, someone who could bridge the gap between all species. As they looked out at the transformed Confederation chamber, Sarah felt a deep satisfaction. The galaxy was entering a new era, one where diversity was strength and emotions were no longer seen as primitive holdovers to be suppressed. And it had all started with a simple act of acceptance, taking in an unwanted prince who proved that sometimes the greatest strength comes from embracing exactly what others fear most about you. The revolution wasn't just in what they had changed, but in what they had built in its place, a new understanding that would reshape the galaxy for generations to come.